Chair Miller, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right, stand by, wait for the light.
Good evening. This calls to order the meeting of the Yountville Zoning and Design Review Board on Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. Can we have a roll call, please?
Member Toposky?
Here.
Member Henthorn?
Here.
Member Cook?
Here.
Vice Chair Zagorczyk?
Here.
Chair Miller?
Here. Excellent. Would you all join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have anyone that would like to move to adopt the agenda?
Excuse me, Chair Miller, if I may.
Yes.
Staff does have one suggested change to the agenda, and that would be to move your administrative items A and B up to or in following approval of the minutes, item 5.
Okay.
So you can meet our new planning director and hear from Town Manager Ralston on the latest on the Commons.
And we'll do the staff reports.
The public hearing will follow those items.
Okay. Okay, great. Anyone want to move to adopt that new agenda?
I will make a motion to adopt the revised agenda.
Thank you, Michael.
I second it.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Approval of the minutes from September 10th, our last meeting.
Unless anybody has anything, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 10th, 2024 meeting.
I'll second that.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining. I wasn't there.
Okay, great. Okay, so we'll go to public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Is there anybody that has a comment about something that's not listed? Okay. Then we're skipping to item 9, the administrative items, the introduction of Planning and Building Director Aaron Heacock. Aaron, welcome.
Welcome. I will introduce, but before I introduce Aaron, I want to recognize and thank Ken McNabb. Ken came in quickly, and I was very fortunate to, have the timing where it worked. As you most of you know, he was the interim in between Kirsty and Irene, and so it was an easy role to fill during a time where we're rebuilding the planning and building department. And I think without your help and your leadership, I truthfully don't know what I would have done. So I want to start by just thanking you and acknowledging you. I will also say that he gave me his resignation letter today, which made sense. But he will be working through the end of October as we transition. And then I do anticipate, I mentioned to Aaron today that, I'd like to keep Ken in some sort of coaching or advisory capacity as we transition. And we're going to want to, talk to you all, as Aaron gets more involved and engaged in terms of how we can talk about the ZDRB and in the future. And we've had some of those preliminary conversations, but now that Aaron's here, we can start to formalize that and start to come up with a plan. And I actually kind of at least looked into the Public Art Committee yesterday. Had a kind of a strategic planning session, so I kind of saw how Sam went about that, and I think there's an opportunity in the near future to have a similar conversation with this group. So I just want you to know that. And, most of you have read or heard about Aaron, and I think, I know we had a short reception, so I'll let you speak. But, I think, when I sought out to find a more permanent director after Irene retired, there was definitely a number of things, and I don't want to get into everything I was looking for, but one thing was someone who has a long career ahead of them, and I will let Aaron speak to how long he intends to work, but I can tell you it's he's got some time to get to the CalPERS promised land, and then I think it's also someone that that is local, someone that he lives right outside of town, and I think, but most importantly, always is someone who has the ability to do the job. And I think, seeing the work and hearing about the work he's done in St. Helena over the last 10 years as the senior planner, who's in essence processing all of the, front line of all the current permits. Like, to me, those were the three things that I really, felt comfortable with in, making the offer. And I'm glad you accepted, and I'm glad you're finally here. So why don't you take some time to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Brad. So as he mentioned, I come to you from the city of St. Helena, where I was there for over 10 years, worked on a wide breadth of projects, anything from small residential remodels to 65-room hotels, everything in between, long-range planning projects, all of the above. So it's been great to come in and get to know everybody who works here, and definitely learning a lot, this being day 2, and have a lot more to learn. And as Brad mentioned, I live in North Napa, so very, very short commute for me, so easy to get here and get home. Have a daughter who's in 3rd grade, and some of you may or may not know my wife, who worked for the Yountville Chamber for several years. So we're very familiar and happy to be here, and hopefully we'll be here for a long time. So thanks so much, and I look forward to working with all of you in the future.
Likewise, thank you.
Yes.
We're excited to have you on board.
I almost wanted to make a motion to welcome Aaron, but
You can make a motion.
no, it's too soon.
All right.
Too soon.
Excellent. And then the next item is an update on the Yountville Commons project.
Yeah, thanks. Lot going on, and if you've heard, the messages that we're trying to get out to the community, we generally have been talking about 3 phases: the initial phase, the interim phase, and the idea or the visioning phase. We're through the initial phase, which was in essence to figure out what we bought and to clean it up and to make sure things work. And I think, for purposes of the interim phase improvements, which I'll talk about in a sec, things are working. So the sewer is working, the HVAC is working, everything that, people don't see but requires a lot of work. And John Ferns isn't here, but if he was, I would give he and a lot of other people a lot of credit for doing the initial work that needed to happen in order to get an asset that had, as you all know, had been sort of abandoned for at least 3 or 4 years. Those buildings, as you know, don't sit well when they're not being used, and so getting in there and figuring things out was, and they finally, if you saw, there's Leo and the crews were out there. I joked that he was like Bill Murray from Caddyshack, like he's, digging up the grass everywhere, trying to find the gopher. They're trying to figure out the whole irrigation system out there, and they're doing a lot of work, and I think they finally have kind of figured out that maze. So as a result of that, I think those initial improvements, are always hard to target on the budget, right? Because if all of a sudden you have to replace irrigation, that can be a big number, and so forth. So I feel like that's behind us, assuming we can. It was funny today, they were trying to get the spigot over at the dog park to work so that we can, and we're bringing water out from outside to make sure our dogs are happy. So that is all working, and I think we're in a good position to implement or execute on the 5 interim projects that I've been, talking about. And I think that the dog park was the first one. We obviously worked through the Park and Rec Advisory Group and others to, come to a decision point. The council supported that. And it seems like a big hit. I've heard, pretty much, 99% positive. There's always little bugs to work out, but ultimately that's become a really good gathering place for the community. But it is an interim park. We are going to have to figure out how it fits. I don't think it's if it fits. I think we're at a point where we've recognized that the town needs a dog park, and it's being utilized by the community. So the other 4 things are all kind of in varying degrees of progress. the Wellness Center, or what will be Yountville Fit, which is the classroom library building in the center. They're under construction. So I just saw pizza. I don't know what just happened there. So they're under construction. I hate to give out dates because it's always tricky, but they are taking initiations for founding members, and I do think our goal has been to get it done by the end of the year, at least have it opened. I'm confident that for the 60th celebration, which is February 4th, we will be open, but I'm hopeful that it'll be by the end of the year. So it's going to be in that sort of window, depending on how things go over there. And I think that will really be great. The Commons Hall, as we call it, which is the old auditorium space, we've already put to use a number of times. We had Camp Wyville there. That room is important because one, it's the most modern of the three buildings, but I think it's also complementary to the community hall over at the community center. So it has given us a lot more flexibility as we look at how we can use those spaces together so that we don't have to displace programming and we can do things. And so I know it's given Sam a lot of options, and beyond just so you know, beyond Aaron joining us this week, we also had 2 rec coordinators join us on Monday. So we're fully staffed in Park and Rec, and I think they'll be able to put good use to both of the halls, and I think that'll just provide additional programming and amenities for the community. And then the final 2 things are kind of a connection, and I was chatting with some of you about it, but the farm stand is essence what the snack bar will become. It will be what's intended to be a 6-day-a-week operation, more of a regular thing, to build on some of the work we've done at the town square with Hoops Oasis and Hoops, and I think that will probably be a little bit more of a slow opening because it's hard to open those things in January, February anyway. It will be open, but there is a commercial kitchen over there. We're still trying to sort through what exactly it will be, but it will definitely be a hub for local food. So what I'm excited about is we've been making progress now on what I'm calling the farm stand garden, which is the old school garden that's over off of Yount. And we had one of your neighbors, and I was talking earlier about how Peter Jacobson has been helping us sort of architect that garden. And we are going to plant some trees this week. We had this great float plan for the parade, so I apologize for those that we were also excited about the parade, but since it was a garden theme, we actually went and bought a bunch of fruit trees and different trees, and we were going to have our dump truck was going to be at the float, and we were going to create this really cool garden, and then we're going to plant the trees in this garden. So that's actually, I think, going to happen on Friday. We're still trying to get the timing because we have to get the soil right, and Peter is very meticulous. I will give him, full props for the importance of the details that need to be there so that the garden will thrive. But I think what's really great is that the intent is for that garden to, in essence, provide produce that will be distributed at the farm stand. So this will be a volunteer effort where, in essence, whatever's produced there, will be given to the farm stand, and this will allow us to provide, local produce at low cost for locals. And I think that can start to grow into really a great operation. And I think that will meet one of the resident needs that we talk about when we talk about not having, a lot of the stuff that's, we have to travel to St. Helena or Napa for. So I think those 5 things, to me, all kind of come together to provide some early success for the site so the community can use it while we continue to do the visioning. And I think the visioning is a process, but I'm trying to make a clear distinction between visioning and planning. And visioning is, all the ideas and the concepts, and we're sort of in the middle of the process. The next step will be October 24th at 3 o'clock here with the Measure S committee, so we can start to layer in housing. And then the next step will be to come to you for a study session, which I think is November 12th. And that's, intended to be, just basically an idea exchange. The study session was a less formal public meeting where the community can come and there can be a free flow of ideas. And I think by the time we get to you, we will have done park and rec and open space. We'll have done housing. I think the next layer is what we'll refer to as civic. And civic can be a lot of things, but all of that needs to sort of stand up with, the proper infrastructure and circulation. So we're going to, have to get into the, parking discussion and some of the stuff that, needs to be there in order for this to all work. But our hope is, after we've had that conversation with all the relevant boards and commissions, is that we'll be able to show some concepts in probably the December timeframe. We'll then be able to have a conversation through open houses and other means, into next year. And, I would like to at least put the town council in a position where in March and April they can make some decisions so we can transition into planning. And that's where, I joked with Aaron, we go from fun ideas, big ideas, moving so fast, what's going on, to like slowing the brakes, and now we have to deal with CEQA and EIRs, and why is this taking so long? And that's where people, I think sometimes struggle with, obviously, the regulations that we have to adhere to, which, are state regulations in most cases. So, I think these things are important to understand. I know as ZDRB commissioners, you understand it more, but these are messages we have to continue to get out and explain to the community. I think the most unique or innovative thing, which I was, one of the reasons Brendan Kelly and his wife, Carrie Morgan, are part of our team as lead designers, is the one-on-ones they're doing. I know they had, I think, another 7 or 8 cups of coffee over there today. So Tuesday mornings, any of you can sign up to go meet with the design team. They also do the last Saturdays of each month. So there's ample opportunity. And what's really cool when you go into that room is you put a pin into where you live. And so when you walk in, you see all the pins. And I think I was over there this afternoon. I don't know, there's probably 50, 60, 70 pins. So I think that's, an engagement strategy, but I think it's a comfort level for most people that maybe don't feel comfortable in a public setting speaking to a mic and what have you. So I've never done that before. I think that's a unique and innovative way to gather input, and I think it's really been effective. So I encourage you all to participate in that, and then, we'll be back here in November, and we'll just keep moving forward. And meanwhile, we're going to make this I guess an asset to the community. That's kind of the point of the interim stuff. Let's put it to use while we figure everything out. And whether the interim stuff is part of the future or not is a question I get a lot. It depends, right? I mean, this is where we're going to design flexibility, but if everyone loves it, there's no reason to tear it down. I mean, everything does cost money. I do think we're trying to be mindful of those resources. And but I'm proud of what we've done to date. I feel like we're in a good place to move it forward, and I'm also thankful to have Aaron here because I have a planner that knows CEQA and knows how to kind of lay the groundwork for the next phase. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and if you have none, I'm going to go home and watch the pod race.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you for the hard work, 'cause I know putting this together has got to be quite tenuous, for all sorts of reasons. So I think we can all agree that we're excited that there are things moving forward, so kudos to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good
Appreciate
meeting. Aaron's also a Padre fan, by the way. Keep him too late.
Had nothing to do with the decision, did it?
So we will move on now to the item number 6. Item number 7, which is the presentation. And I'm going to recuse myself because I am too close to proximity of the proposed project.
Chair Miller, that would be item 8, the public hearing. I believe
Sorry.
we have no presentations this evening.
It is item 8. You're right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to clarify for the record that it's your primary residence that's too close.
That is correct.
Okay, so there are no presentations on the public hearing. I assume there will be a staff. Was staff presenting? Yes. We'll pass it on to staff.
Okay, if you'll give me a minute here for Hillary to bring up the presentation. So, good evening, Vice Chair Zagorska, board members, Ken McNabb, Interim Community Development Director, making my last presentation to the board. I'm going to get emotional.
so short.
I know. So the item before you is a request for approval of modifications to a previously approved design review permit for renovations to an existing single-family home. The proposed modifications include minor changes to the exterior of the building, partial enclosure of the previously approved unenclosed auxiliary structure in the rear yard of the property, and also new fencing along the front yard area. As you are aware, this project has been before the ZDRB before. In March of 2022, the ZDRB approved extensive renovation and remodel of the home, a new unenclosed auxiliary structure, which we'll talk about later tonight, a detached accessory dwelling unit, and garage and pool and landscaping improvements. Following the ZDRB's approval, the applicant came forward and received permission from the town council in July of 2022 to do some restoration work along the creek portion of their property. Following that, a building permit was issued for them to commence work in accordance with the ZDRB's approval. As some of you are probably aware, in July of 2023, the department received news that the structure had been demolished, which was not what was expected by staff nor the ZDRB. I believe staff held several meetings with the applicant to talk through how it was that happened and how do we move forward, now that it has happened. The applicant retained a historic architect who I believe is here this evening to initially to guide us in the proper way now to restore the building. But through that work, it was determined that the original report, historic report the ZDRB received, was inaccurate in its conclusions that the structure was eligible for listing. And that the structure isn't, in fact, an eligible property for historic listing. The town retained its own historic consultant to review that report. Our consultant agreed that the initial report received by the ZDRB was erroneous in its conclusions. And we reached an agreement with the applicant on how to proceed. The applicant did agree to still adhere to the principles of historic renovation and restoration, and the item before you tonight reflects that. In July of 2024, the applicant received an administrative approval to convert a portion of the interior of the home to a junior accessory dwelling unit, and then at the end of July, building permits for the three structures were approved or reissued so they could commence work on the property. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the modifications that are being proposed and are for your consideration tonight. The slide here at the top is what was approved by the ZDRB. At the bottom on the right side is highlighting what the change is. So I'm starting with the west elevation or front elevation of the property. You can see there in the lower right-hand corner, there's a red circle around a door. This proposed change is to replace a window with a Dutch door. This door will allow dual use of the pantry as a mudroom and provide an alternative entrance to the pantry area. On the south elevation, which is a side yard area, the proposed changes are to add a window on the left side or west side of the south elevation, which would function as a window above the sink in the pantry area. On the east side of the south elevation, of the previously approved door would be converted into 2 windows, and that door is proposed to be replaced because the door proposed on the front facade would provide access into the same space, so this door would no longer be needed. On the north elevation, which is also a side yard, the applicant is requesting removal of a window on the first floor. That's the larger red circle there. The removal of this window is necessary to accommodate PG&E utility installation, and the applicant can talk a little more about that if they come up to speak. There are no changes proposed on the second story elevation or second story portion of this elevation. And now looking at the east elevation, this is the rear yard facing elevation. The proposed change previously, the upper had bifold patio doors. The applicant's requesting approval to modify that to sliding glass doors. And just so the board's aware, this is an elevation that will not be visible to the public. In addition to these changes to the primary structure, we've talked about the addition of a stone and wood fence. The picture there at the bottom is an illustration of what the fence would look like. The proposed fence height is 30 inches, which is below the maximum of 36 inches allowed in a front yard area. The applicants also proposed, and we've approved through the building permit process, a reduction to the size of the swimming pool that had previously been approved, and also some new concrete pads for mechanical equipment. Those are illustrated in the small circle, kind of in the center of the upper image there, and the horizontally oriented oval at the left side of the image there. And then finally, there are a couple of proposed changes to the auxiliary structure that was previously approved. The one is an enclosure of a small portion of the southern end of the auxiliary structure. You can see that it's at the bottom of the image, kind of in bold lines there, for creation of a bathroom, which would just be a toilet and a sink. There's no shower or bathing facilities in there. Also proposed modifications would be elimination of a previously approved fireplace and chimney that was on the east side or back side or right side of your screen. That is a feature that has been or is proposed to be removed. And then also a modification to the west facing elevation, which is the right side of the image. The northern portion at the top there has been adjusted in length, or excuse me, width, so that it's symmetrical with the southern portion of the west facade. As detailed in the staff report, staff believes that the required findings for approval of the requested modifications can be made. The main residence modifications are relatively minor and consistent with town standards. The partial enclosure of the auxiliary structure is allowable and will not exceed FAR limitations. There is a 100 square foot allowance for this type of use of space. And the proposed front yard fencing is within allowable height limits. So with that, staff is recommending the ZDRB find the project as exempt under CEQA and approve the requested modifications with conditions. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Do any of the members have questions of staff? No?
Mackenzie, a definition for auxiliary structure? Do you have that?
Do you want me to read it to you?
Yes, please.
Okay, hold on. Let me pull up the email I sent. Okay, Yountville Municipal Code Section 17236.010 defines auxiliary structure as a detached, non-habitable structure or facility that is ancillary or subordinate to the main building, the use of which is incidental to that of the main building on the same lot, or to the use of the land. Enclosed auxiliary structures include, but are not limited to, garages, carports, greenhouses, storage sheds, and trash recycling enclosures. Unenclosed auxiliary structures include, but are not limited to, patio covers, gazebos, and pergolas, built-in kitchens and barbecues, fireplaces greater than 6 feet in height, decks over 30 inches above grade, playhouses, sports courts, pools, hot tubs and spas, and freestanding mechanical equipment. Unenclosed auxiliary structures cannot be enclosed on more than 2 sides.
Okay. So the addition of a bathroom to an auxiliary structure, can you still justify that as incidental? I mean, it's not in a gazebo or a fire pit or anything like that anymore. They've now made it into a more important building. Not really. Not really in the definition. Pointing at each other. Sorry.
I'm happy to give a response to that, but, I don't know, Board Member Cook, if you were directing your question to Mackenzie or to
Anybody
staff.
who feels like
So
answering it.
I will start with acknowledging your observation or comment that, yes, the addition of that restroom intensifies, if you will, the use and nature of that auxiliary structure, but that staff, would make the interpretation, or is making the interpretation, that it's still auxiliary or secondary or incidental to the primary use of the property, which is a single-family residence. The auxiliary structure is for the enjoyment of the residence. It's not a residence itself. Therefore, it's secondary, but it's not inconsistent or not... What's the best word to use? There is a relationship of having a partially open outdoor space, especially given that there's a pool, but next to both the house and the auxiliary structure for the residents to, enjoy some shade or use the restroom there. But that is a question ultimately that the ZDRB, can consider and make an interpretation on. And I don't know if Mackenzie, you'd add anything else to that from a legal standpoint.
Not particularly. I guess just my reading is that creation of a restroom is not in and of itself antithetical to being an auxiliary structure. The point is that it's subordinate to the primary building on the property. And that is sort of a discretionary judgment call. But then I would also remind that when we need to disapprove an application, it needs to be based on the required findings in the code. So that also guides our interpretation here.
Okay, thank you.
Ken?
Welcome back. I think it looks fantastic. I think actually there's a couple of these changes that we don't need to really go into detail because they're already in the proposal of what you're asking for.
Could we ask them to comment before we move from staff questions to staff?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any questions to staff?
No.
I just have one. So is the structure, or a couple actually, is the structure still have openings on 2 sides? Is that right? So it's very much an open, airy type structure?
Yes, on the west side, if I can go back here.
Okay.
So you can see on the left side of the image, that is a fully open wall, and at the top north side, that is a fully open wall there. The east wall and the dark line, and the south, you know what a plan looks like. I don't need to explain, and the restroom would be closed wall. So it does meet the definition of open on at least 2 sides.
And the other question was one of the interior modifications was to turn a section of the main house into a JAU. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So hypothetically, if the applicant wanted to enclose this and turn it into like a remote bedroom, they could probably still do it, given that the square footage would no longer count?
That's a great question and something we did think about in our analysis. So the answer to that question is no. Unlike ADUs, JADUs do count towards FAR. So there would not be enough FAR for the applicant to legally enclose this building, because once you enclose it, it's included in the FAR calculation.
Okay. I was just checking. Thank you. I have a probably not helpful question about the historic property, or no longer historic. Did you get any clarifications to how it went from being historic to non-historic?
We did. I wasn't here at the time, but there was, and actually probably the best person to answer that question would be Mr. Holbert. He is the applicant's historic architect, but our independent architect concurred with his analysis, so maybe I'd suggest the board direct that question to Mr. Holbert for a response.
Okay.
And staff does recognize this isn't the first time the ZDRB has found itself grappling with a situation where, a project's presented as a renovation and all of a sudden turns into a demolition because things were discovered, after the approval. So we are cognizant of that, and I think probably the best person to answer your question would be the one who's most qualified and familiar with the conditions that were discovered.
Yeah. It caused no small amount of controversy. I'm sure the applicants are well aware of it. And I will, taking all the findings at face value, then, everything worked out for the best and I guess a highly favorable way. So that's, I'm glad that things ended up the way they should. But it was unfortunate.
Yes, I understand that, and I hope the ZDRB knows and the public should know, staff did take this matter seriously. We did have an independent evaluation of the applicant's analysis and concurred and negotiated with the applicant to continue to adhere to historic design guidelines or standards, despite the fact that the structure was concluded not to be historic. So, yes, you don't like when something like this happens, and that undermines, some of the confidence in the process here. And we recognize that the applicant has, followed the terms of the agreement, is going through the process of, coming back to the ZDRB to present their changes, going through the building permit process. So it wasn't without some setback in terms of cost and time and expense to the applicant that, we're in this situation now.
Okay, thanks.
Just one quick question, because I wasn't part of the first round when this was presented. Was the removal of the fireplace, was that a ZDRB or council recommendation, or was that just applicant decision?
It was from the applicant, and I'm sure they can come up and answer your question on why, what guided that decision. It wasn't something requested by the town.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, then we welcome the applicant if he or she wants to come present. Reminder to state your name and your relationship with the property.
Hi, my name is Tracy Sanderson, and my husband, Britt Clays, and I are the co-owners of the property. We'd just like to thank the members and the staff for reviewing our request for modifications. I think from our point of view, we've started to kind of mentally move into the property. So these little things like it'd be nicer to have a window here versus these little things. So that's sort of how we've gotten to this point, is as we've continued to work with our team, it's just those little things that make it more of a home for us that would improve the experience. So that's kind of what brings us here today.
And we suspected that some questions might come up about the demolition of the house, so we prepared a little summary that I can kind of walk through in 10 minutes. But
And just for clarification, it is somewhat ironic that both our historic architect and our architect, they're both named Mark. This is not Mark Hulbert. This is Mark Becker, the project architect.
My apologies.
That's okay. It was an easy error to make.
It's a popular name for architects, I understand.
I thought this would be helpful to refresh the recollection of the members of the board that were here when we went originally through the approval process. And for those that are new to the ZDRB, a quick refresher. So as Ken indicated, we did get approval for the current version of the project in 2022. But this saga goes back all the way to 2020. And we put the property under contract right when COVID emerged, and worked through a development plan that proposed the split of the lots into two separate lots. Our lot, kind of unlike most lots, virtually all lots, but for one that I'm aware of, in Old Town is 16,000 square feet. In part, it's the proximity to Hopper Creek. In part, I think it was originally envisioned as a double lot, but be that as it may, it's a 16,000 square foot lot. The minimum lot size, I believe, in Old Town is 4,000 square feet. So it was substantially larger than most of the lots in town. So we had proposed back in and got approved for a plan to split the lot in January of 2011, I believe.
2021.
I'm sorry, 2021.
It's been going on a while, but not that long.
Yeah, that long. To split the lot, and in order to effectuate that plan, the original structure that was on the lot was the two-story structure that was built decades ago, perhaps as late as the 1800s. And part of it were more modern additions to that, and those additions encroached over the newly created lot split lines. So we had to remove the encroachment. So we executed, after we got approval from the ZDRB in the spring, we executed kind of the phase one demolition plan to remove those encroachments, to take out the additions to that building. And it was originally proposed and was approved by the ZDRB that we were going to lift up the two-story structure after the wings were removed, relocate it slightly to the north on the lot, make a renovation of that structure, and then build a second house kind of behind it. So when we executed the phase one demolition, we discovered a pretty significant amount of deterioration of the structure. There was a significant amount of water damage, wood rot, termite damage that was revealed when we took the, more recent additions.
Contemporary addition.
Right. So while we were doing that, we engaged Pernitzky and Chatham, who is our riparian corridor specialist, to execute the phase two evaluation of our creek bank restoration program.
So they took a pretty deep dive into the existing conditions, our plans, took time to study it, and then came back to us with their recommendations.
So they originally reviewed the plan. They did the original restoration plan that was approved by the ZDRB as part of the landscape design plan, but we re-engaged them to kind of take the next step in that. And when they took the next step, they further evaluated the creek bank and decided there was more erosion than they originally bargained for. The bank was unstable because it had lost a lot of the native plant material, and the bank wasn't being held together.
Yeah, on the second evaluation, the bank was dry, so they were able to walk it from end to end and really get a closer look at the existing conditions, and they're finding all these exposed roots and just like enormous holes in between the structure just based on erosion over the years. So that, kind of changed their point of view on things.
And as they did that deeper dive, they concluded that the trees were weakened by the erosion along the creek bank, and there were very large voids that literally you can crawl under one or two of the trees. And so the stability of those trees is supported by the roots that grow to the south, which is right across a proposed driveway that we had proposed as part of the approved lot split plan. So they said, forget about what we said before. We recommend you don't put this driveway here because you're going to be traversing over roots that are holding up these trees. It's long-term, it's going to be a nightmare. So armed with the information from the demolition plan and Pruninsky and Chatham's recommendation, we came back to the ZDRB and proposed not to split the lot. Instead of building two-story homes on the lot, one on each lot, there's going to be 2 smaller ADUs, one on each lot. There was going to be 2 one-car garages, one on each lot, and 2 swimming pools, one on each lot. We modified the plan to reduce the intensity, to back off the creek, to help mitigate any impact on the creek bank by proposing 1 2-story building, main house, 1 ADU, a swimming pool, and this auxiliary building that has been the subject of the discussion tonight. So we followed that bouncing ball through the process and got approved. Do you remember? I've got it in here, but I don't want to read this thing verbatim.
That second round of approvals, October 2021, right?
Well, that's when we submitted it, but it was approved in October of 2022.
Excuse me, right, okay.
So we got approval for that. The ZDRB approved the plan. We got building permits in October of 22, and because of the impending rainy season, we decided to wait to start construction until the spring of 23. So we started construction. The contractor mobilized, I believe, in May. We started, the first opportunity was the general contractor erected scaffolding around the 2-story structure. And the objective was to remove the horizontal redwood siding board by hand, which we did, and stockpiled it on site.
Which in the initial historic evaluation, that was what was deemed as the historic key component. So we were very careful about that and instructed our team to, they board by board with hammers and, removing all the nails and stockpiling it per what's considered the best practices in terms of airspaces between the boards. We were doing our best effort to ensure that the quality of that wood maintained intact.
And I think it's important to note that the original historic architect, which is Architectural Resource Group, ARG, they've done a lot of work in the valley. They're very highly respected. And they gave an evaluation based on the information that was available to them at the time, which was a fully intact house without any demolition, without any structural investigation of the house. They walked around the house, took pictures of the house, reviewed the record, and they came up with the conclusion they did. But as we dug into the house, it was physically impossible to pick up that house and move it because it had deteriorated so badly. And so when we came back to the ZDRB for the second approval to build 1 house and an ADU and the auxiliary building, we had proposed to save the front facade of the building only. And the plan was to isolate the front facade, set it aside, build a new structure on a new foundation, and reapply that front facade elevation to a new structure that was structurally sound and built to current code.
As you see in common historic renovations, with propping it up or setting it aside to repurpose it when things are finished with the modern structural components.
Right. So as we started pulling the boards off, we started peeling back the layers of the onion and found a pretty desperate circumstance with the existing structure. But the biggest takeaway was that structure was originally a barn. It was board and battens, stood on end, connected in the middle with 1x4 battens, with no structural framing of 2x4s or 2x6s whatsoever. They were just board and batten redwood boards kind of nailed together, stood up.
Yeah, just butt jointed, and then the batten was essentially the adhesion.
And then, unbeknownst to ARG, because they couldn't see behind the siding, when we started taking the siding off, we discovered that the siding was probably installed somewhere in the 1940s, not when the original structure was built, which we believe was originally built as a barn. And we found some things that gave us an indication of that. And so once we took all the V-rustic siding off the building and discovered the significant amount of deterioration in the building, we stockpiled all the redwood siding on site with the intention to refurbish it and reuse it. And once we got all of the salvageable siding off, excuse me, and at the end of June, the building started to tilt because it essentially, what was holding it together was the redwood siding that was nailed to the barn and the roof, which we started taking off because of the perimeter demolition that we had done. And so we made a decision in the field to take down the building and salvage the siding and rebuild it on site because it couldn't be salvaged. It would be like you found a building that was ravaged by termites and trying to save that and attach it to a new building. It just wasn't physically possible.
And we, in all our discussions with the town, fully admit that we made an error in judgment. We should have run down here and grabbed the building inspector or whomever from the town that we could to say, please walk down the street with us and see what we see, because what we see is a dangerous condition that needs to come down. We have gone to meticulous lengths to care for the portion of the building that we were told was the critical element, being the V-rustic siding. And to us, from a safety concern, it just seemed to be the right thing to do to bring it down at the time. But in discussions with the town and the various departments, we fully admit that we should have run down here or got somebody on the phone to make sure that someone else was seeing what we were seeing. But we did not do that.
It was late on a Friday morning. The building was leaning. The building inspector doesn't work on Fridays, and we made a decision that, in retrospect, we could have probably figured out a way to shore up the building to last until Monday or Tuesday when the building inspector was back, but we didn't do it. So the red tag violation was assessed on June 26th. We spent the next 4 months kind of reevaluating the condition. We salvaged a lot of the components of the building that were stockpiled on the site. Finally, after 2 months, one of the neighbors asked if we could please remove the debris because it smelled so bad. It smelled like a sanitary sewer. And we got dispensation from the staff to remove it, which we did. And then we engaged this historic architect, Mark Holbert. He went back and reviewed the record. He said the assumption that the original structure was a house was incorrect. He couldn't find evidence that the house was inhabited as a residence well into 1900s, and that, in his opinion, there was no obligation to try to salvage deteriorated materials, and there's always a like-kind exchange that can be made when you discover this in an historic structure. So he wrote that report. We submitted it to staff. Staff engaged the M Group. They reviewed the findings of Hulbert. They wholeheartedly agreed with him and supported his conclusion that the building really wasn't eligible to be listed on the historic record because what we found, kind of in the guts of the building. And they recommended delisting it from the record because it was originally listed based on HRG's report. And they did that, and then we signed a settlement agreement with the town to let us proceed with construction. The only requirement of that, and other than following building code and all that, of the agreement was to install the V-rustic siding as much as was salvageable to the front facade, which we were planning on doing. We told the town we were going to do that on June 26th when the violation was issued, but that's the circumstance that we found ourselves in then, and here we sit today.
And any of the, whatever elevations of the building that we don't have enough of what we preserved will be milled to match, and we've actually already engaged that process and gotten it started so that we're ready. The materials will be ready when we're ready.
We will use much of the salvage siding on the front facade, and it's really the balance of the building. There wasn't enough, even if every board could have been saved, there wasn't enough material to do the whole house. So we're doing milled to match siding for the balance of it, and we'll use as much of the refurbished siding on the front as we can.
So that might be a longer explanation than what you were expecting, but it is kind of a long experience, so we apologize if that took too much time.
Well, and there were reports in the local press, a variety of resources that we chose not to engage in that, and we just thought, let's solve the problem and we'll come out the other end, and facts will prevail, and which they did, and so here we sit.
Thank you. You've been through a lot. Before you leave, any questions of the applicant from members of the board?
My only question is just back on today's issues, just for an explanation of why you're changing the first floor bedroom into a JADU. What's the reason for that?
We have kind of there's two sides of it. There's a personal side. My father's 92 years old, lives in Tampa, and it's become evident over the last few years that he is not, even though he prefers to live on his own, that he's not in a position or in an ability or skill set to care for himself.
You don't have to share personal information. I just wondered what the reason,
Well, so
the reasoning is for actually instead of just it's an extra bedroom.
Well,
If I can intervene, the JADU is not something that the board has any discretion to consider.
It was just, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I just don't want to get into the weeds of something that was already ministerially approved.
Okay, that's fine. Then that was my only question.
Any other questions? Yep.
I think if we could just make two other quick points.
Yeah.
To Tracy's point about, now that this has been an ongoing project for several years, we're getting more and more familiar with how we would live in the house. We've had this, development with Tracy's dad. And, the main house essentially has 3 ensuite master bedrooms. So we thought really the safest place to put an elderly person that doesn't need care on a daily basis, but we got to keep an eye on them, was in that bedroom. And so we started rethinking how we would live in the house. And I think we've come to a conclusion on that. But part of that was driven on how we would use that auxiliary building. Originally, the thought was when we got the original approval back in 22 from the ZDRB was we would use it as an outdoor kitchen, and it would be at the end of the pool. And we discovered that was really impractical. It's 100 feet away from the back of the house. It's not really practical.
Drag the food down there, drag the food back.
Yeah.
Seemed kind of impractical.
So we created a little barbecue area on the back porch. And the way that structure is going to be used today is really as an auxiliary building to the pool, which we don't have grandkids yet, but we have nieces and nephews that have kids, and we expect they will be utilizing the pool on a regular basis. And Tracy's also an artist and intends to use that auxiliary building as an art studio and covered in paint. She doesn't want to walk the property, walk into the house, or walk into the ADU.
I've only had one show at the Steve Rogers Gallery, so I need to get some more art finish to maybe get another show. So.
There's always vacancies on the Arts Commission, too. Thank you.
And one other quick thing on the fireplace. We decided as we're evaluating all the energy commitments we're making this in this structure, and we live in a house across the street from the town hall here, and our PG&E bill has tripled in the last year and a half or so. We started evaluating ways to conserve energy and cost. So we removed 2 of the fireplaces in the ADU. There's still one kind of main fireplace and we thought the fireplace in the auxiliary building was overpowering. in that small structure. So we thought a smaller fire pit would kind of give the aesthetic effect that we're looking for at a more thoughtful and energy efficient option.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for putting all the detail in place. Obviously, as I mentioned, you've been through a lot. And I'll admit that when that now no longer historic structure went down, people went to a dark place in the realm of ask for forgiveness, not permission. But I can speak for myself where I fully understand now the sequence of events that led up to it. There is another building in Yountville that's actually was discovered to be a barn as well. So it's not the only one, which is interesting. So that's part of the process. It would have been great to have taken some pictures and done the right thing at the time, but hindsight is being what it is.
Well, thankfully, we had a lot of documentation, and there's dozens and dozens of pages of documents that we submitted to staff that they used in their evaluation.
Which is great.
Which are all on the record.
Perfect.
Available through the clerk according to the staff report, so that's all public information if anybody's looking for the more details.
Yeah, thank you. No, I remember the original design and the modified, and here we are again. Let's hope that this time it's all systems go. So thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll
Thank you.
close this section and see if there's any public.
By the way, our architect, Mark Becker, is here if you had any architectural questions about the changes we had proposed.
I think we are, to speak for the group, I think we're good. Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll open to any public comment. If there is any. Nothing submitted. Okay. I will go ahead and close public comment. And as the last part, we will chat amongst ourselves. Any comments or thoughts you would like to share?
I can comment. Okay, so welcome back. I think there's many changes that you've made in regards to the design that I think is a bigger attribute than the way it was before. I think it works perfectly. I don't think you're asking for anything extraordinary, and I think in particularly the town's done its homework once again, and I think it follows every regulation, every ordinance you could possibly think of, outside of maybe what be considered a couple personal nuances, maybe just particular taste from one person's opinion about a window or a door. But overall, I think it's laid out incredibly well. I thought it was from the very beginning of the inception of this project. I think, again, kudos to you for ensuring the bank, if you will, the creek. I think taking it from 2 properties down to 1 larger property, kind of like a homestead, if you will, I think is much more appealing as well. I think it works out perfect. So nice job. And again, I appreciate the town as well for being so into the project, if you will, from the time the first debacle happened, if you will, despite the fact of being deemed non-historical. I'm sure it's kind of a little bit of a nut for everybody to swallow as well. You know what I mean? However, I agree with Michael. We have to take those situations, move on, and just kind of deal with them the best we can. But I feel very comfortable to say that I think this project is going to be amazing and a great attribute to the town. So nice job. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate the fact that you're adhering to more of a historical, architectural vernacular, even though you're not required to. So I think it's a beautiful project. As for the auxiliary building changes, there's already a solid wall where you're putting the bathrooms, so it's not really adding much mass. And with the returns that you have on each side, I think it's balanced well. It's open on 2 sides. So, I think overall it's a beautiful project, and it's going to enhance the town. So,
I think the changes are minor, and they make sense to me. So I'm in agreement.
Yeah, actually, on that note, I was actually trying to reconcile the threshold between a staff approval and a ZDRB approval. It may have been the bathroom, because staff can make approval changes if it's not significant. We, of course, love interacting with applicants and are joyously here on a monthly basis, but I realize you've been here a lot and may not want to see us again, but I think it was probably on the cusp of ZDRB approval based on probably in the bathroom versus a staff.
I think it was also just the history, that this project left the ZDRB
Right.
with a renovation idea and turned out to be a demolition. So just coming full circle, you're absolutely right, it is an extra step, but it was part of the agreement that the applicant would come back to the ZDRB to, have this discussion for the public record.
We appreciate it. All good stories are told in 3 chapters. This is clearly the third and conclusive one, we hope. So.
And I also just wanted to say thank you for this. Having not been part of the process earlier, it was very helpful to walk through it all and understand how it all came to pass and where you were coming from with regards to the demolition, et cetera. So thank you.
Okay. With that, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll give it a shot.
Please do.
I make a motion to approve resolution number 24-019, approving the modified design review for 6630 Jefferson Street and finding the project exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. I believe, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. At this time, I think we've worked through all of our agenda items. Yes, any updates on administrative matters?
I just want under staff, I just have one thought. Since I've been here twice now and have seen this circumstance
Thank you.
come up, in the future, maybe something for Director Heacock and the ZDRB to consider is when you have these projects that involve restoration, renovation, modification of historic structures, that maybe there's a condition in there requiring some sort of exploratory demolition work prior to getting into the heart of the project, just so there is a mechanism there for staff and the applicant and the contractor to take a look under the hood when maybe, it hasn't been looked under the hood before and see what the conditions are and be able to stop things from getting too far along. So just a thought for you to think about, but it's, I try not to think the worst, but it's, it seems to happen more often than not that these, well-intended projects discover problems and we have a demolition all of a sudden. And I think there is justification for those, but it's also something that, we should think about as we go forward when we're working with these older historic homes.
Frankly, don't.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not done more often.
Yeah.
When you're watching HGTV, it's exciting when that happens. Good TV. So I don't recommend it for television, but for reality, it strikes me as a good step. I mean, because that place on Madison, it was the barn too, and it cost a lot. Of course, they had a nice non-conforming placement on the property, so it was beneficial to keep it. This one, not so much, but frankly, that it's a no-brainer. Seemingly.
Yeah.
One comment about that. I don't know if that should be, I think that should be explored more for almost all construction projects on a certain level. So just speaking loosely here, because I was involved in the exact same kind of thing, remodeled to new build, if you will, but we're talking about a home that was built in '72. So I think it depends on what you're grabbing, and how do you, again, close on a home, rip the walls out without having, you know what I mean? So I think there's like this kind of little gray area about what we're speaking about, which I would entertain absolutely the conversation. So I think there's a way of protecting the homeowner, the construction company, as importantly the town, so that way this is a cohesive movement forward instead of being snagged for 6 months to a year.
Yep.
So thank you for bringing that up.
Okay. If there's no other comments, welcome again, Aaron. Thank you so much. And anyone like a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.